you're so hollow inside. You really don't feel anything when you're depressed. You feel nothing at all. I've always told people when you're depressed, it won't take away everything you love, but it will take away your love for everything.
Riley Wood, thank you so much for coming on No Streetlights podcast with us today, and we're really glad to have you here today, man.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, no, happy to be here. Happy to talk anything art related. So,
really sorry you had to sit through that cringy opening there where Aaron was terrified. He doesn't usually get scared unless it's of a shower or a beard cut, but other than that,
was awesome. It was cool seeing you guys do your thing.
He just hangs up and like never comes back.
Yeah, that was super cool. Thanks.
Hey, thank you so much for having me here.
I gotta
actually go. I left the vacuum cleaner on or something. Riley, so we're here to talk a little bit. So what caught my attention, right, was this really fascinating YouTube video called Tales from the Exit Door that I saw, and I really was like, damn, like what kind of mind created this really cool and interesting, unique 35-ish minutes experience? And lo and behold, my wife knows your fiance, and hey, look, bada bing, bada boom, you're now on our show. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and we can dive a little bit deeper into, you know, what you do.
Yeah, I am, I guess, an author first. I really just try to consider myself an artist just because I don't like to put myself kind of in a box too much. For a while, I was walking around telling people I was a writer, but I was making films, which seems more like a director or more like a filmmaker. You know, I do photography, but I don't really consider myself a photographer. So I really do anything that I want or feel like I can or, you know, desire to do at the time. Yeah, I don't know if I really have a title very much. I just sort of make things, just a creator of all kinds. If I want to dip my toes in some media or some sort of way of delivering content, then I guess I'd never really shy away from doing it. But yeah, I guess you could consider me an author. Writing is sort of the thing I've been doing for the longest. I've been writing since I was like 6, 7 years old. So I guess that's something that I've had the most practice at, as opposed to other art forms that I've just picked up in recent years.
I love that you described yourself as a creative, because so many people do pigeonhole themselves and don't allow themselves the opportunity to express themselves through all these different medias. So it's really lovely you haven't tamped down the urge to just branch off into whatever's sparking your interest.
Yeah, no, I think it's I think more people should do that, just because you know, the perspective that you bring is very valuable. You know, Virgil Abloh, the late Virgil Abloh, the guy who did Off-White and was famous for all those Nike collabs and stuff, you know, he went all the way through school as an architect and as an engineer, and then he got hired as the head men's designer of Louis Vuitton, you know. So when you look at the things that he made, it was sort of an architect's perspective on fashion, which is so interesting. I think that's why it was so innovative, because there were so many people who went to fashion school's perspective on fashion. This was an engineer's perspective on fashion. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like somebody who goes and who studies photography, you know, and they call themselves a photographer, they're going to be having a photographer's lens, no pun intended. You know, I like to approach, when it comes to, at least, I mean, just on the topic of photography, I guess, I mean, how would a writer look at taking a photo? You know, how would a writer look at making a film or writing, you know, something that a songwriter normally looks at, like a way somebody writes a novel, you know? So I think that is what I think makes innovative art, or generationally like sweeping, you know, brand new art, is it's always somebody from some other camp coming in and saying, I'm going to look at it this way and taking it this way, that usually ends up making like, the boundary pushing stuff.
What's really awesome about what you said is we had a guest on recently named Nigel, who also is my brother-in-law, but he was honestly kind of saying the exact same thing you were talking about, like, so he's a film editor or video editor or whichever, format he decides to be editing, but he edits video, and he also dabbles a little bit in writing and directing. And to him, he feels as if like cross-pollinating into all of those different aspects of the same, I guess, field, right, works better for him. So yeah, definitely talking about how as a author or a writer, and then going into becoming a photographer, or what was his name, Virgil Abloh,
Virgil Abloh,
yeah, that guy, like being an architect and going into fashion design, like that's such a fascinating concept of like taking another skill and utilizing it in a way that nobody would see happen normally. A creative, exactly like you.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
fascinatingly enough, you're also officially a podcaster starting today, in case you haven't ever been on a podcast.
Yeah, you guys broke the seal here. I can't believe I'm actually doing a podcast. Said for the longest time, I'm like, man, one of these days I'm going to have to start my podcast. So this will hopefully get rid of any urges I might have had to do that.
Or it's going to spark it even further. And to be quite honest with you, that was one thing that Aaron and I struggled with for like a good 3 or 4 months before we actually jumped in and created No Streetlights. Was we were just sitting there like, what would we like? We want to make something. What are we going to make? I don't know. Let's do a podcast. About what?
Yeah.
Like it was a lot of back and forth that had to happen there.
It sounds like a lot of work. And I know people joke about, oh yeah, you just get a mic and like podcasting is what it is. But I mean, seriously, sounds like a lot of work. Like, how do you keep things interesting, from episode to episode? I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I think we're finding, we're starting to find the edges of our own universe here ourselves, which, hopefully people have been checking out what our content has been coming out and what we've been putting out, and seeing how we're changing that and compelling our audience to, engage with us a little bit more and provide that feedback. Yeah. But speaking of which, Riley, this is a really great segue that you've just provided me here, because now I get to go ahead and remind all of our listeners / viewers that our podcast is located on Apple, Spotify, Google, and pretty much every other audio platform you can imagine. If you want to watch us and go see Riley's incredible haircut, Aaron's beautiful beard, or the reflections in my glasses, / I'm wearing a 777 shirt, which luckiest number in the world. Go check us out over on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, check out our audio platforms. We very much would like it if you would, subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, or anything like that. Share it with a friend. All of these small things that, don't seem like they're a whole lot to us creators, they really mean the world to us. So please consider doing these things for us and, spreading the love with us. So
spread it.
Enough of that. Let's go ahead and get back to the show here with Mr. Riley Wood. So what I really want to talk about with you, Riley, is Tales from the Exit Door. So from my understanding, it's a collection of some of your stories. Now, are these the stories that you've already published, or are these completely separate stories?
This is brand new content for me. It's my take on a 2024 version of a collection of short stories. So these are all brand new. I treated it like when I published my first book in print. I treated it like, these are stories that no one's ever read before, or no one's ever heard before. So yeah, these are all brand new stories from my mind, and sort of indirectly related to one another, building off of one another.
That's really interesting because I feel like most people in your circumstances, after publishing a book with short stories, would just repurpose some of the short stories. But you went not just the extra mile. I think you went the extra, 2 miles, 3 miles, whatever, right? Like you took
5K.
Yeah, you went the extra 5K here. and you decided to create whole new stories for this exciting project that you wanted to create. So what kind of inspired you to even do this?
Uh, yeah, that's a crazy question. I get that question a lot, and whenever I really read any story, and I always just sort of answer, well, that's just sort of what my life was like at the time. And then you hear about a story of someone's belongings turning into air and then floating away out their house. They're like, so that happens to you often? And I'm like, yeah, well, kind of, in a way, in a way. Um, I don't know if I really. I mean, I guess I could kind of do the short, brief version of it. This was made over the course of 3 years, probably during the hardest period of my life. The number one thing I wanted, I've always said this, that
Alrighty.
I wanted to show and communicate to people how up life was for a little bit. And I mean, it seemed like an irrecoverable time. I was on the brink of retirement pretty much from doing any. Oh no, Aaron's gone.
Yeah, he just texted me and said, "Hey, we just lost power and Wi-Fi."
Oh no.
So just hold on just a couple minutes.
Sure.
That booted back up. It has been a constant struggle. So I live in Italy, right? And one funny thing that nobody ever tells you about Italy is that the power grid here is basically built with a piece of gum and a potato. So
I think you're fine.
Anyway, getting back to like your inspiration and everything, one thing that you mentioned was that over the 3 years that you were writing this, you said it was during one of the most like difficult times in your life. Can you kind of explain to me like what that means? What was that experience you were going through?
Yeah, no, I think I was just lost. I was lost and I couldn't really find a way out. I mean, I think I was at pretty much ground zero in terms of just everything. I mean, every single measure that you can probably measure life satisfactory levels by were at the very pits. I mean, I had no money, I had no friends, I had no family members to support me, no direction in life. I wasn't happy with where my relationship was. Every aspect of my life was in rapid decline. And that caused me to be extremely depressed, which for the first time in my life, I sort of understood, I think I'd always been an anxious soul. Mm-hmm. On the other end of the spectrum, somebody who felt too much. But this is the point where I was not feeling anything at all. I always told people, you put me on the scariest roller coaster in the world, I'm just going to sit there like, the whole time, just completely stoic. I mean, I didn't care at all about anything. I didn't care about my feelings. I didn't care about other people's feelings. It was like being in a pitch black room and not having the ability to speak. That's the thing. I mean, you're so hollow inside. You really don't feel anything when you're depressed. You feel nothing at all. I've always told people, when you're depressed, it won't take away everything you love, but it will take away your love for everything. And that is almost worse a little bit, because everything is sitting there right in front of you, but it's like in black and white now, Yeah. Even worse, it's like you can't even see it, even though it's right in front of you. Like I was saying, right. A pitch black room, all of your objects in your house are still there. It's just the lights are completely off and you're walking around, with your eyes closed, trying to feel around, and you can't speak. You're like, where are you? Where is somebody here? Can somebody help me? And no one is answering. And so I kept telling myself while I was in that, if I could find a way out, if I could keep fighting, if I could find an exit, I would be telling everybody about it, because it wasn't okay. And people need to know that, especially those closest to me. So, I mean, yes, I did make it for me. I made it as a trophy of experience. I wanted to invent a trophy of experience because I felt like those 3 years was such a waste of time. And I was like, it can't be for nothing. Those 3 years of wallowing around being a hateful, hollow piece of shit. that can't be for nothing at all. I have to make something to show that I lived through this suffering. But it also was to show people and to tell people, like, hey, for the longest time, you looked at me and you asked me, what is wrong with you? What happened to you? And I, for the longest time, couldn't respond. I didn't care to respond, nor was I in touch with myself enough to really understand what was happening. I was just sort of a ghost with skin. So that was another reason why I made it, was because I was like, okay, I need to summarize these last 3 years for you to catch you up to speed a little bit. For anyone who's close to me, for anybody who wants to listen, I need to catch people up to speed a little bit on what life was like for the last 3 years. Tales from the Exit Door. I wrote a story that led to the inspiration of this, where a guy is sitting in a waiting room in a doctor's office, and everybody's name is getting called but his. And he's like, oh, well, they'll call me eventually. They'll call me eventually. Eventually, he's the only person in the waiting room. It's been hours, the lights shut off, everybody goes home for the day. And he's like, oh, they'll probably still call me, just waiting to get called and stuff. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to leave. I'll come back another day. But he gets stuck in between the waiting room exit door to the hallway. And he's like, I can't really, like, what if they call me any moment? I feel like my name's just about to get called. I wasted so much time here. Just to leave would be unworth it. So eventually he ends up pitching a tent and starting a campfire in the frame of the exit door of this doctor's office. And he's sitting there just sort of like, wasting his whole life pretty much. He grows a Tom Hanks castaway beard and everything. And he's sitting there in this doctor's office exit door, not quite having left, but also not quite being there, somewhere sort of in between. So that sort of purgatory state,
have you ever heard
sort of never being in one place at once is that's my summary of it.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, and I find, because what you described, right? Like, first of all, it's kind of comedic and also very tragic at the same time. But have you ever?
That's my brand.
Very fair. Have you ever heard of the anecdote of, if you took a goat, you can do it with any creature, but I'm just going to use a goat. If you took a goat that
are we talking about Schrodinger's cat?
Kind of. It's like if you took a goat that was as equally hungry and thirsty, and you put it exactly in the middle of a bowl of food and a bowl of water, it would die of indecision because it could not decide which it would go for first.
Exactly.
That's kind of your character in your story.
Yeah, and that's Schrodinger's cat is basically, the same sort of phenomenon, and that was a big inspiration for me a little bit too, where it's like the cat is both alive and dead at the same time. You stick a cat in a box with some poison, and you close the box. You don't really know that it's dead or alive until you open that box again. So right now, before you open the box, it sort of exists in a state of both. So that, to me, this sort of feeling of being in between, this feeling of leaving, the act of leaving, not about to leave, not having left, but the act of leaving, was probably my main inspiration. Not just leaving behind like every single thing that was, bringing me down, but also leaving behind my life. You look at it from both perspectives a little bit. Yes, I'm so happy to be leaving, but also for the last 3 years of my life, I was leaving everything, that I loved and cherished and valued in my life.
It's a perfect metaphor for depression, and the way that you're explaining it, it's interesting. But every single person has had a moment similar to that, or a feeling similar to that in their life, whether or not they've ever been able to actually take it, put it into words, or do anything about it. Some people just they just kind of, I'm not going to say they grow out of it, but they grow around it and they adapt and become a different person after self-reflection and whatnot. But they never put a name to it. You did.
No. Yeah, it's. I think that's one of the saddest things about depression, is a little bit, because people can empathize with it a lot. People can be like, oh, I've been depressed before, but you really can't. And what I mean by that is that empathy, or at least so much of empathy, is feeling the way that someone else feels. But what does empathizing with somebody who feels nothing feel like? It feels like nothing, So of course, I can talk to a friend who's depressed, and empathize with them, but they're not feeling anything. I'm feeling nothing too. And so this to other people feels like apathy. I think it's depression is such a a crazy example of kind of one of the catches of empathy a little bit is it's so hard to gather any when you feel nothing. And so that's why I don't really feel. I mean, I still feel like a lot of resentment for all the people who sort of just left me behind during that time period, but I understand it a little bit because it's like, yeah, you looked at me and you genuinely tried to feel what I was feeling, and you felt nothing, and so you kind of just distance yourself naturally, um, which makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
definitely.
at the same time, it's something that it's so sad on both sides, you know.
Now, I feel like a lot of those emotions and those feelings that you're talking about here, I can feel them come through in Tales of the Exit, or Tales from the Exit Door, sorry. I can feel it come through, but I'm curious, do you want to give me some examples? Like, is there anything that kind of sticks out in your mind in particular that you're like, yeah, this, I was really feeling a certain type of way when I wrote this, or,
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I was feeling a lot of things for sure. Uh,
it's better than feeling nothing.
yeah, no, that's the part of it. Honestly, was I was like, oh my god, like it was actually such a beautiful moment where I was like,
Hmm.
you know, just sitting there at my computer, and when you're going back to being this depressed, you know, it's like I lost the love for the thing that I felt like was sort of my way out, which was making things, you know, making art. I didn't. I sat down at the keyboard, and I would have rather blown my brains out and than try to sit there and write a poem or a short story, you know, which is partly why the stories are so short. I mean, they're only 2 pages if you look on the Google Doc. And not only does that make it more accessible for anybody who watches it, because it's literally like you could fit it on a note card, which I think is where media is going anyway. You know, things are getting shorter, and people's attention spans are getting smaller, so it just makes sense. But also the 2 minute stories that are in that were the only thing that I could really write without feeling like I wanted to die. um, you know, so but I would sit down at my keyboard and I'd say, you know, I have this idea, and then I would feel it for a second. But holy shit, I just felt something. Like, oh my god, I gotta hang on to this, you know. And so that made me realize, oh my god, I'm stuck in this cycle. It's not just purgatory, but like what the experience of purgatory is life. It's a cycle, and what that cycle is the cycle of grief. Um, you know, I spent those 3 years in the 5 stages of grief over and over and over again. I was in denial, you know, then I would get incredibly angry. And then I would
Do
get,
you have the
you know,
password for
starting to
the
plead with, you know, just wanting things back the way that they used
Frontier
to be, starting to try to do
676?
anything to sort of settle for anything. Then I would get extremely depressed, and I would just sort of check out. And then I would get into acceptance, right? And that's sort of the most deceptive one, because acceptance is beautiful, but also acceptance is just another form of denial. You can think one day, there were so many days that I woke up and I was like, you know, I think I'm finally over this. I think I've really like kicked it. Like, I think I'm over the hump. This is it, you know? And then I realized, no, dude, you're just back in denial again. You're in denial, telling yourself that you've beat it. You're still at the bottom. You know, and then you would get angry again. You'd get angry when you realize that. And then you'd start bargaining again. And so what I was doing for those 3 years was just repeating the cycle. Acceptance was turning into denial, and then I was just starting over and over and over again. So those individual feelings are very strong. And I would spend months in anger, and I would spend months in bargaining, and I'd spend months in depression, you know? So I was like, why not, now that I'm aware of that cycle, and now that I'm aware of what period I'm in, why not when I'm in that period write a story about it? You know, so the first story of Tales from the Exit Door is called Denial. And my corny self obviously sets it in the Nile River. Denial is the biggest river in Egypt. And it's about a guy who sees a beautiful woman and thinks that she's in love with him, and convinces himself that he can cross the river, you know, and they'll be together. But in the end, it's sort of revealed that she didn't even know he existed, you know, and he ends up getting eaten by crocodiles, you know. So he was in denial, literally in denial, you know. The second one is about a guy who's really pissed off with his neighbor, so he burns the bridge and he accidentally sets himself on fire. You know, the quote that I was going along with this was, I set myself on fire from burning all these bridges, you know. one of the proverbs that really caught my eye during this time when I was writing this story was, speak when you're angry and you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret. And so, anger, fire, it's this thing that just sort of can destroy. It's this thing that's made out of, short bursts of energy. And then there's bargaining. It's about two prisoners trying to bargain for their lives, and eventually they end up killing each other instead of actually working together like they should have. And then there's depression, where a guy literally loses everything that he cares about. Everything that he cares about is still there, but it's not. Now it's hollow, and it's not quite the same as it used to be. But then it's sort of revealed in the end that he was all just a crazy person. He's clinging on to his backyard garden hose, when the cops find him, thinking that his house is going to float away. And then the last one is acceptance. It's about a guy who gets his boat stolen, and he comes to accept, it is what it is. But then, guess where he ends up again? Back in the river, getting eaten by the crocodiles. Back to the beginning of the tales, when the guy in denial gets eaten by crocodiles because he's in denial. And then we just start all over again. Hence the ending. This is not an exit. You will never leave this stuff. And I think that's sort of something that I've come to terms with, is that for so much of this, it was about me moving on. It was about me moving on from all of the things that had hurt me and all of the things that had made my life, just sort of weighed down the way that it was. But I realized there is really no moving on. There's no moving on from anything. And that's kind of a good thing, actually. And my positive perspective now is that it's kind of a good thing. You may be able to leave and tell the tale, but it will never leave you. You can't just delete negative experience. It will never go away. So you might as well make something of it. And that's what I did.
Damn. Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Riley. So whenever I originally listened to Tales from the Exit Door, one, I was really hoping that the episode was transcribed on YouTube, which apparently it's not, so I could read along with it.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. That's no worries.
No, I played around with the idea of maybe putting Tales from the Exit Door into print, and then, putting some of my favorite stills from the film. But I actually have sort of a long-term goal with that. Eventually, I think I'm going to make this into a trilogy. And that maybe, because I think I tried for a little bit and it was about 40 pages, which isn't really publishable work, but I was like, well, if I could accompany it with other work, so that maybe I think at the end we'll have sort of an anthology of sort of the Tales trilogy. That would then I could put into print, and then people could sort of read this stuff. But yeah, no, go on. Sorry.
No, you're fine. So when I was listening to the story, I got like the spooky vibes and everything, and I really enjoyed it. It gave me like this concept, the idea of like found footage / analog horror, which is something that I've been really big on myself lately. But you explaining this and going through what the stories are about in depth, because like listening to it versus actually like getting the opportunity to read it is two different experiences here. But the fact that your story is the cycle of grief, like, holy shit, that adds a whole different layer of horror to me here, right? So
yeah.
Aaron, welcome back from the mountains of Appalachia and all the darkness that you've probably experienced. Hope you dapped up Mothman for me. So the Google Doc that you're talking about, like, is this something accessible to the public, or is this not?
No, this is just part of my thousands
and thousands of
trash ideas that are stuck in my Google Drive. I'm at like 98% full on Google Drive, and I'm pretty sure half of that is just like started stories that were never finished.
Well, I'm gonna re-listen.
But that's something that made out of.
Yeah, I'm gonna re-listen to Tales from the Exit Door a couple more times so I can actually like take in the gravitas of these stories. So, just to make sure I got the names of the stories right. So we got Denial. What was the name of the second story?
Anger.
Okay. So you actually named it after all the cycles of grief,
Yep.
Correct?
All of them are just named after
Denial,
every
anger,
single
bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Yeah.
Damn.
That's what every single was. And
Damn.
yeah, no, I think that that's sort of, I don't, not that it was ever my goal to like sort of announce that was what it was about, because that's what it's about to me, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think it was really interesting when people were watching this, and I would get reactions sort of just like, oh, it was such a cool vibe, and I was like, okay, well, that's cool. Like, it's a vibe, I guess. But I think that that's part of why I feel robbed a little bit, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. I do feel robbed a little bit in the sense that this is the best thing I've ever done. I think that this is the best thing I've ever done, and because every single choice that I make in this project is intentional down to the T, down to the T. Every single thing has a layer with another layer under it, with another layer under it, with another layer under it. You know, one of my biggest inspirations when it comes to at least filmmaking is Stanley Kubrick. Guy does this all the time with his films. You know, you look at The Shining, for instance, you know, on the surface, it's sort of about domestic violence, you know, family violence, family structure, you know, within this family. But then you can sort of take it into, you know, the step further where it's all families. And then you can sort of take it a step further where it's like all of humanity or all of America. And then you can take it a step further where it's all of humanity has this cycle of violence that they're sort of inflicting on one another. Sorry, I just love The Shining so much. I just got into talking about how much I love The Shining.
No, we could talk about that for hours.
Point being, though, is that I think that all upon all levels of criticism, there needs to be, no matter what point of the magnifying glass you're looking in on, you know, whether you're zooming way in or whether you're looking at the whole big picture, need to have something. And I think it's really beautiful, and that sometimes is about something completely different. You know, the big perspective sometimes looks completely different than the shrunken perspective. And that's really cool to me with Tales from the Exit Door. And I feel like I accomplished that really well. I think I'm the only one who really sees it. So I feel like I kind of failed a little bit in that way, in that I feel like people watch that and they're like, well, that was kind of creepy and eerie. And like, you know, I do like the reaction of some people when they're like, wow, that was really disturbing. Because I was like, yeah, that's good, because
that's what you were going
that was what life was like.
Yeah.
But I mean, going back to like making it for me and making it for other people, I think like I found an exit and I'm really happy, and I watch this often and I think, wow, damn, I did a good job. I really summed it up really well, you know? But then at the same time, I made it for me, but I also did make it to like sort of communicate my pain. And I think that may be the only reason I'm feeling kind of down about the reception of the film a little bit, is because I truly, genuinely did make it for me. Like I was saying, I wanted a trophy of experience to show for what felt like wasted time. But it was partially my intention to be like, hey, here's my pain, and here's what my suffering was like. And I still get no response. I share something incredibly raw and get little feedback, you know, from the void again. In a way, it still kind of feels like I'm in that dark room. But that's generally how struggle and the general population perceives it. They never really validate it anyway. No one ever really cares about your misery because they have their own, obviously, hence the ending. This is not an exit, you know. I was aware that when I put this out, people still wouldn't get it. You know, people still wouldn't get it. Well, that's cool. You know, it was never to them, resonated to them that this was about the cycle of grief or depression or and what have you. You know, it was just sort of a vibe for them on their afternoon, and something they could sort of sink in and out of quickly. Which is, I can't blame people, because that's fucking what I do. So to me, though, the fact that it wasn't perceived, or that isn't perceived like that, you know, people are sort of surprised when I talk about like how much thought went into it. That makes the stories more powerful in my mind, because the idea of lost salvation, of sticking out, you know, your hand from the water and hoping somebody pulls you up and it never coming, was sort of the whole point anyway. You know, there's really no exit to this. So that's why, to me, I think it just gets better with age, because I sit around and I show people this and people are like, oh, well, yeah, it's cool, I guess. You know, and I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much how my life was like for a little bit. You know, I could come to a family member and be like, look, man, I'm really depressed. You know, I'm on the brink of collapse here, dude. I don't know how many more days I got left. You know, I've been thinking really bad thoughts, you know, and they'd be like, no, I'm sure. You know, just taking a stride. It's like, that's the same.
Go take a shower.
Yeah, no, right, exactly. Yeah, no, and that's the craziest thing, is like, I forgot how to be a human being, you know. I will always forever be grateful again for being able to eat 3 meals a day, shower once a day, put an outfit on once a day, go to work, you know, because life wasn't always like that. And that was what it was like. So
I find
sure. I mean, people were like, why don't you just be normal? You know, I'm happy to be normal now, but Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. No, so first of all, right, like there's this one song my wife loves playing it in the car. Um, and I can't remember what the hell the song is about, but it's like a guy talking about how he's really sad, and then somebody comes in and they're just like, "Hey, don't be sad," and he's like, "Holy shit, that's it, I'm cured." You know, like that's part of the song. I couldn't tell you what it's called, but it's a vibe. I enjoy it, but it really explains to me, right? Because whenever I watched Tales from the Exit Door, I felt this profound sense of like something from it, you know, like something that resonated with me. And so grief has been a really massive part of my life, down from like since I was young to very recently. I went into some of the darkest years I've ever experienced. About 5 years of my life, I delve into nothing but alcoholism and self-hatred and all kinds of awful things. And we've covered all this stuff before on my show, on the show, on my show specifically, Aaron. But we've covered all this stuff on the show before. And I think your your piece here, it's like art imitates life, imitates art, and it's so fascinating, and it breathes so much more energy into me about this, because when I was listening to it, I felt that sense of profound something, right? But that's because grief has affected me so much throughout my entire life. I understand that, and I've been through that, and I've lived through it for the past 30 years. Like, grief sucks, and I've had to deal with it for so long. And then versus like some of the other people who may have watched it or listened to it, and they're like, yeah, man, I really like the vibe. Sometimes those people just aren't the ones who've experienced grief to that depth. You know, it doesn't resonate with them because they don't feel that. And it's a haunting thing, right? Because like this, you take an idea like Tales from the Exit Door, there's profound sense of grief. You place it in front of somebody, they have no idea what they're experiencing, they have no idea what they're looking at, and then one day that door is going to open and they're going to be like, and they may not remember the stories, they may not remember your video. It's very possible, the infinite amount of content we can consume these days, but it might just in a way peek in the back of their brain that they have looked at grief before in the form of your video. They just didn't know it at the time. Damn, that's haunting to me. Sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah,
please.
yeah.
That's just earlier on. The only part of the conversation I was here for was earlier on. You were talking about these stories standing the test of time because they're from a real, deep, vulnerable place. Instead of just making the next big thing that's going to get the most clicks. And I want to delve in a little bit about the imagery. You said every single thing was intentional. So to me, that makes these creepy, camera shots, black and white, of the power plant. Makes me think that was that to communicate that the pain is what's driving you forward, or that it's just pain is perpetually produced from generation to generation, and that is kind of, for me, the cycle of samsara, how we get trapped in just this awful cycle of pain, where sometimes, and I identify very strongly with this, forgetting to be a human being for like 6 months or a year or something, I was right there with you, man. I felt like I was actively living in purgatory, just barely scraping by, didn't know how to talk to people. Even here on the show, like I couldn't interact with people because people would express what they were going through, and I was just buried in gray.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk more about the imagery of the power plant and even
Totally.
deeper into the video?
Yeah, I think that going out and being a night crawler was really like an experience, because I would go out late in the morning, sometimes even by myself, and just sort of crawl around. I live down here in Southern California where everything is extremely industrial. The oil rigs are heavy, and there's a lot of refineries, and it's just that imagery sort of surrounds this whole area. And so being around at like 1 a.m, crawling through these like, just factory settings and stuff was really an experience. But I think with what I knew from early on, like I knew at first I kind of started out, I want to get Long Beach at nighttime. And then I just kept gravitating towards man-made things and sort of industrial, heavy modern metal things, things that are extremely man-made, whether it be like big skyscrapers with like hundreds of windows, or these interweaving, kind of human-looking power plants, like you're talking about, smoke billowing from the top, things like that. Those were really interesting images to me at the time. And I think going back to what we were sort of talking about, this is at least my intention, is that I think the original intention, at least, was that, like we were talking about with Kubrick, there's sort of the larger scale and the smaller scale. The larger scale was, well, actually, we'll start with the smaller scale. The smaller scale was that I was on the way out, and everything around, when you're on the way out, your whole world seems like it's on the way out too, So that maybe that's why I was so fascinated in the industrial stuff, because to me that sort of, when I felt like my world was ending, so I felt like I needed to put world ending shots in there, things that sort of signified the end of the world a little bit. So to me, it was just sort of like this hypermodernism, heavy industrial imagery that sort of conveyed sort of that end times motif that I was going for a little bit. But also, I think you could also sort of look at Tales from the Exit Door like a ode to late stage capitalism a little bit, in that we're sort of on the way out the door, man. And that this is what life in America in 2023 is like. It just sort of feels like purgatory, like it's sort of a feeling of being on the way out. The best days of this life are behind us a little bit. Whatever the heyday was, it's gone. If there was ever a heyday. So I think a lot of people that I talk to, they're sort of interested in that. I have a friend who found it to be sort of a great testament to sort of what it was like to live in modern America. And while that was the intention a little bit, to me, it's more fascinating the small scale a little bit, because it's more personal to me a little bit. Just sort of the feeling of the end of the world. But then in editing, that's when this sort of took on its own life, because I had this big collection of stuff, all this shit, all these industrial things, and I needed to tell the story. So when I was making it in editing, I thought, well, okay, so I should try to find the shots that best match up with the story being told. And there are some in there. But as I went on, as I found each individual shot, I started to notice it's another story being told. Story completely unrelated to what was happening audibly. And so that's when it sort of magic happened a little bit, in that if you watch Tales from the Exit Door with the sound off, it is a completely different story than if you were to watch it with the screen off. There's a completely different story being told through the visuals. And this is all intentional. Again, like I'm saying, this is all intentional, because I didn't realize it until I watched all the footage, that I was like, wait a minute, if I put this in a sequence, if I put this in the sequence that it's in, I think I can tell a story here, a completely different story. And this story would transcend the 5 that you're hearing about, which seem unrelated, right? But this one is the story of somebody looking, wandering, leaving, you know what I'm saying? And so the title card, or the brilliant, cover art made by my good friend Logan, is of a man in all black, no face, just sort of the shadow person, walking around. I like to call this person the Wanderer, but they're never seen in the film. And that's probably because the whole film is in first person, right? So you are sort of taking the place of this wanderer a little bit. And then you watch, I swear, anybody who's watched this, please watch it again and just watch the visuals. There's a story being told about somebody breaking out. You hear the very beginning of a door being beaten down, somebody like breaking out the door really hard, trying to bust out of something really hard. And then eventually there's this sort of moment of bliss, and it's looking down a long hallway. And then you see this exit sign, like, yes, I can get out. I'm out. Right. And then they get out to a bigger place. But how do you get out of there? So then you're looking for the exit to get out of there. And then you end up in this bigger place, this big port, the port of Long Beach. How do you escape that? You know, how do you get out of there? So it's this person sort of looking for, how do I get out of here? 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 And everything that they're seeing doesn't really look all that great. There's sort of moments of brief salvation that sort of, I feel like, coincided with the music at the time, but there's also sort of moments of pain and agony of like, oh my God, I thought I just left and I'm in this other place. Every exit door is an entrance to another place, right? And so that's what the shots are sort of conveying, is that yes, you exited this area, but now that was just an entrance to this area. And so you can sort of watch this person wander around this hellscape a little bit, of breaking out this door to this hallway, to this building, to outside the building. You know, outside the building you think is the exit, but it's like, where's the exit to this area that the building is in? And so you start to see the story of somebody wandering, trying to just keep finding the door, trying to find the door. Which I think if you were to take out all the stories, you would see that a lot. And so I think it creates its own kind of separate experience a little bit. Again, makes the ending more powerful when you end at a train station, you know, which to me symbolizes like leaving. You know, maybe this train will take me far away from whatever, you know, hellscape I'm in right now. And then you see this door that says this is not an exit. And you realize that no matter how far this train takes me, whatever area I find myself in, I'm still going to be trying to find a way to leave it. So that's eventually what the visuals are sort of to me. There's a really powerful sequence towards the end, which I consider to be sort of the emotional climax, which has this big oil refinery with the American flag over it. I feel like that's really powerful for the people who find that to be, you know, a testament to, like I was saying, this sort of decaying capitalistic state that we're in. I also do feel like a little bit wronged by the system a little bit, so that's why it kind of resonates with me. But yeah, that's sort of my long-winded summary of the visuals and how much I love the visuals. I think they're great. I think that it gave me a lot of experience with the camera. I didn't really give a shit whether or not I was getting good shots. I just wanted it to look cool. I wasn't focusing on the rule of thirds or any crazy like photography techniques at all. I was just going out there and just trying to get shots of things that look cool. Things that matched what I felt. Yeah, I'm super happy with the way that it turned out, honestly. I see things now. I go out and I see things now that I'm like, dang, that would have been a good shot for Tales from the Exit Door. Because it sort of matches that tone.
That is such a beautiful and well-crafted metaphor for the dark cyclical thoughts that occur within depressive episodes. You know, you just you feel so stuck, and no matter what you do, you're still stuck. It doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing, you're still in it. Wonderful work and excellently phrased. Like, that's a beautiful explanation, Riley.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I want everything working for me. You know, I want everything that I make, I want it to be working for me. If it's working in some other way, then it's not working. And I want every single thing to sort of repeat itself a little bit. And so, yeah, this is my first time like really trying to do anything like super crazy visually. I think I got a lot of good practice. You know, I think that I'm going to take these techniques, you know, to a place hopefully that can grow. But I think that the more I talked, or the more I made it, the more I was with the visuals and stuff, the more I realized, like, you know, this is kind of where life is, not life, but like sort of where media and art is going anyway. You know, you watch TikTok videos of these Reddit stories, or what you're seeing on the screen is completely unrelated to what you're hearing on the video. You know, you're watching someone's comedy set while somebody power washes his driveway, right? Like the state that we live in, things don't need to be interrelated to each other. You can tell two stories at once because people's attention spans are like that now. And so that was sort of the vision, I guess, from the get-go was, you know, how can I create a 2023 version of a short story collection? no one reads books anymore. Well, I mean, people read books anymore. Sorry to all the readers that I might offend, but I actually talk to people out on the streets when I went out there to try to advertise my book. I mean, it was really, I mean, I was in my hustling phase for a little bit when I actually published my book. And the amount of people who were like, yeah, I'll take this, but I'm going to tell you right now, Riley, I will never read this. It's really cool to own this. It's really cool to flip through this, but I will never read this. You know why? Because I don't read. But everybody's on TikTok and everybody's on YouTube, right? You know, if you're trying to get your stories out, how would Emily Dickinson get her stories out now to the masses? You know, Emily Dickinson would probably be making TikToks, bro. She'd be doing dances, you know, talking about whatever she wanted to talk about while doing the dances.
Bro,
So
could you imagine like a Shakespeare play, like being performed, like Juliet, oh Juliet, where art thou, Juliet? It's like somebody clip that, please. But
it's where we're at right now. That's the way that people are consuming media, right? And I think that's great because I have a tiny little pea brain too. You know, my stupid little monkey brain can't like fathom watching long form content. I know we were talking about it earlier, iceberg videos, things like that. Like that is very rare. I'm sitting in my car on my 15-minute break now, just watching brain rot, you know? And that's, if I'm going to watch brain rot, I need to watch at least if people are going to be watching brain rot, if that's like a majority of what it's like, I'm going to make some depressive brain rot, you know, I'm going to make some brain rot that is already rotten. And so that's the sort of art form that I think I've really come to love now. Is I don't know if I'll ever publish again. I think I might, just because it makes people happy. It was really weird. I think that's something else that kind of bummed me out a little bit, was that when I published the Circuitry Might, which was great, I published that and I handed people that book, and people were like, wow, this is awesome. This is so cool. You know, I released Tales from the Exit Door, which felt like even more of a triumph. And people were like, oh, nice. When's the next book coming out? I'm like, bro, this is the book. Like, this is the book right here. Like, and it has like barely 200 views on YouTube, you know, as opposed to the Circuitry Might, which I had people coming out of the woodwork, you know, people like distant cousins who I hadn't talked to in like 12, 13 years, being like, you published a book, you know, like they were so excited about it. The level of work that got put into the Tales from the Exit Door far outweighs that. But for some reason, the concept of like having a book is so cool to people, which is, I think, why I probably need to like sell out a little bit and probably turn Tales from the Exit Door into print. Not just because it'd be cool to have, but I'm thinking about how short stories, the future of short stories. I think that's a piece of media that hasn't been innovated on since like the 1800s, man. Like I mean, I guess people are reading on Kindles now, but I mean, Kindle is just a glorified book. You know, we need to figure out how to get short story, which no one even reads anymore, by the way. Short story was like a huge thing back in the day.
Oh yeah. Growing up, you know, now it's like the big thing.
Yeah, now it's novel. Like now, 100% novel. You know, you're reading your romance novels. You know, those are really, really big. You know, you're reading your mystery novels, your murder mystery novels, and things like that. No one reads short stories anymore. I mean, unless you're like one of those people who love short stories to tell in the dark, which I mean, I grew up on. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
But
then the movie flopped, so now everybody's like,
yeah, who cares? Who gives a shit, right? But I think it's so funny because I look at people right now and I see how small their attention span is. I see how small my attention span is. And I'm thinking, why aren't short stories huge? Short stories should be gigantic right now. Maybe because they're not short enough. Maybe because they need to be like 2 minutes instead of 10, 15-minute reads. You know, short stories should be a big deal right now. But they're not. And so I was like, how can I solve this problem? How can I solve this problem? Like, I have a way. I know my short stories can resonate with people if I get them out there. I just had to change the format, you know. And this format that I've created of this sort of cursed feed, you know, sort of drip feed thing, I think is the best way to deliver short fiction now. I think it's the best way to do things, and it's how I plan on making my next project. Hopefully, we'll see what it eventually evolves into. But I think that this way of getting my work out to people is far more accessible and far more modern than putting it in print would be. So I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to continue to make, but I mean, whenever I make the follow-up to Tales from the Exit Door, which isn't going to be a direct sequel, by the way, they're going to have nothing to do with each other, but it's going to be told in sort of that same format. I think now, instead of making something depressing, I kind of want to make something happy and nostalgic a little bit. which is funny because I feel like the my best work is usually the most devastating. But we're gonna try to do something different here, and we're gonna try to make something like sort of sincere and nice and heartwarming. Uh, we'll see. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. That idea may be scrapped eventually, but I'm still going to use that format though. My point being is I'm still going to use that format of I don't know. People like it. When you scroll down your TikTok feed, you see music, you see stories, you see visuals, you see all sorts of things. I think that it needs to be now all that.
Mhm.
You need to be, and all of it needs to be working together. At least in my mind, I think that everything needs to be complementary. So yeah,
So Riley, so there's a lot of stuff that you said here, and uh, I'm not gonna try and summarize it because
yeah.
um, no, it's not because you said too much, but it's because you're so multifaceted, right? Like you have, man. So the big thing that was like really coming to my mind, right, is like you're an artist in a very wide sense, almost kind of like a bird shot from a shotgun, right? But like you're hitting your mark on all aspects. And I I don't want it to sound like kind of cliche or anything, but I do feel like you're hitting a market that's not people aren't it's ahead of its curve is kind of what I'm trying to say here, right? Because like you're going for this concept of dude, sorry, I was trying to keep as many notes as I could, but the only thing that really came out was multifaceted experience because you were talking about the visuals, the stories, the sound crafting, and everything that you put into this one passion project. And then like you start peeling back and it's like a layer like of onion. Like you just start laying like cutting back and there's just so much there. And it's so fascinating to me because like your your story here is a commentary on society. It's a commentary on depression. It's a commentary on your life. It's a commentary on your experiences at that time. Like you've put so much onto this, and it is absolutely fascinating to me. And yeah, I do feel kind of like you're tapping into an untapped market, and like no, not necessarily everybody is ready for that, dude. But
Yeah, it didn't do very well on TikTok.
fuck
But
them. It's
also,
going to do well, dude. Like
it
people
didn't
are.
really. I mean, whether it does or not doesn't really matter to me. If the people who are close to me hear it
Mhm.
and I'm able to watch it and sort of be like, yeah, no, like I said, it's a trophy of experience. My
Yeah,
job was to invent like a first place medal, and I
you.
feel like I
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I think that's my problem. Is my dream really? My real dream is like I want to be able to live off this shit. I would love to.
Mhm.
You know how much like stuff I could do, like how many like great things I could do if I like didn't have to go to my 9 to 5.
Yeah, no,
Like if I
trust me,
could
I know that
do
feeling.
this creative thing full time, like
Yeah.
I mean that's really the dream for every artist, right? So in a way, you do sort of need to sell out a little bit, which I've never liked the idea of. I've never liked the idea of like hustling. I tried it with the book. It did lead to sales. That was the most success I've ever had. I think the book didn't do half bad. I mean, it wasn't enough quite to live off of, but like it was a nice little check.
Mhm.
But that was the product of a lot of hustle, like a lot of hustle, like a lot of advertising, a lot of like getting it out there, a lot of like networking and things like that. It was exhausting, man. And so then you realize like, man, to make it as a creative in the industry, like there's really no way to do it but selling your soul, man. Like you really have to get out there and become like a sad, like please, like begging person, like just get a shot. And to me, that's kind of soul crushing a little bit. And that that's kind of maybe the initial thought of where the exit Tales from the Exit Door kind of came from a little bit was because I had spent so much time like making this art that was genuine, and now I have to sit here and sell it, which doesn't feel genuine at all. And so then it just sort of feels like, man, what's the point? So yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep making things because I just feel useless if I don't.
Yeah.
The 3 years in between the book and the film were so crushing and so defeating because I felt like I wasn't getting at least like some tiny project out at least once a year or something. Not that that's my goal. I feel like if I don't have an idea of something by the end of the year, then that's probably a red flag. But Yeah, no, I don't know. I'm just gonna keep making things, man. I don't really, I don't think I'm gonna. If I at the moment, I think I start focusing on trying to sell it and trying to get it out there to as many people as possible. I have to think of that still. Like I said with Tales from the Exit Door, like that was still a part of my mind was like, how can I make something that's accessible now?
Yeah.
Because I do care about the audience. I care about the audience a lot. Um, I actually probably care about the audience a little too much. I think that gets in the way of a lot of things. I've made things in the past that feel a little bit disingenuous. Not released, but I've made things in the past that feel disingenuous because it's like solely for the audience and it doesn't quite feel enough like me. And
Hmm.
so the things that I put out now, whether it's the book or Tales from the Exit Door, those were things that like I felt comfortable with because I felt like they kind of serve both me and the audience equally. Um, but I forgot where I was going with that. But yeah, no, I think making things for people, it's important to me.
It's a
Uh,
give and take relationship, I think,
it is.
because
It
you
is.
have to have that passion behind it, but you are looking to market it in some way, shape, or form, whether it's to become like,
Yeah.
a millionaire and have like sell out stadiums just for people to hear your voice or whatever. But I mean, which isn't always the goal. Sometimes the goal is just letting people know that this experience, like this is something that I went through and this is something that people go through.
Yeah. I
And
think
I
just
think,
putting it out there, having the bravery
mhm,
enough to put it out there, I think is half the battle. You know.
yeah, absolutely. Like I remember there was a story, or not a story. It was some kind of quote or something somewhere. I don't know. My brain, smooth brain, doesn't work that great these days.
It's
Getting old,
okay.
but
Same. Yeah.
it was something along the lines of like, if you put out a podcast and it's really bad, like at least you put out a bad podcast or something. I don't know. But the point was, is like you still got to do it, right? Like you put it out there, and you put all this time and effort and passion and soul into this project. I think it's incredible, and I really do hope more people actually get the opportunity to experience this and sit down and kind of go through it. And what I find so fascinating about you, Riley, is like you're not just like you don't just focus on one area. Like you're a very witty individual. You're very funny. You're very well spoken. Like you've put so much energy into this, and I sit here, and when I went through your YouTube, I found the video where you were going around asking people what their biggest fears were. And I thought that was one of the funniest, like most interesting commentary videos I've ever watched. And it's like, it's not a very long video. I think it was less than 10 minutes, but like the character you're portraying in there and everything. And I highly encourage our audience to go and check out not only Tales from the Exit Door, but just go watch Riley's YouTube channel if you're interested in just having like a little laugh and watch some videos, because they are super fascinating. And I think he does an awesome job. But yeah, the video where you're going around asking people about what their biggest fears were, I was watching it, and like, I think my wife was like, she asked a question along the lines of like, do you think he's actually like being serious in this, or like, is he actually this nervous or something? And I was like, no, it's clearly he's playing it up for the humor of the video. I was like, but this is such a fascinating commentary of like, just digging into the concept of like this person, he's going out there to ask everybody his biggest fear, but that is his biggest fear, and it's like this cycle that he has to constantly put himself through to do that, which brings me back to Tales from the Exit Door. But also, like, sorry, I started digressing there a little bit, Riley. I just wanted to
You're
simply
fine,
say
man.
like the amount of thought and energy that you put into your projects, whether it's a 35-minute video about a bunch of short stories that you wrote during one of the hardest times of your life, or if it's a less than 10-minute video that you put out just on a simple commentary slash joke. Like, I thought it was incredible. I think you're an awesome artist and an awesome creative, and I really hope to see more projects from you. Whatever Tales from the Exit Door 2 is going to look like, whether you even stick with that name or go for something different.
Not. It's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the next one will be probably called For Cloudier Days. I'm thinking For Cloudier Days is probably the next. Damn. Now that I put that out there, now I have to do it. That's the hardest part. Is that I said it, and so now I'm gonna do it. It might not be released. If I find out it sucks, I'm not gonna release it. But I don't think it'll suck. So
Nah, put it out anyway. Because
yeah,
I'm going to look forward to it. And just think of your audience as me, because I'm going to watch it.
sure.
Immediately put up the and everything.
I treat everything that I do like a million people are gonna watch it. I live in delusion a little bit. I know no one ever does. I totally do. But I feel like, if you want that's the success and the money of somebody who gets millions of views, then you need to start treating your art like millions of people are going to see it. Because one day they might.
It's like dressing
They
for
might.
the job that you want versus the job
Exactly.
that you have.
I think that, and what happens too is I might, do some backflip on TikTok and get 1 billion views, and then all of a sudden people are flocking to my stuff, and then bam, I didn't get 1 million views for 10 years, and then all of a sudden I get 1 million views on this now. Suddenly, Tales from the Exit Door becomes this like niche cult classic. Not that that's ever going to happen, but you never know. Nowadays, the internet is the forever archive, and so you have to make things that you'd be proud of or that you'd be fine with people seeing in 60 years.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So we're gonna run this opener. I just want to make final thought here from me. First, Salvador Dali created everything in layers. He did beautiful oil paintings, and on top he did sketches that told 2 different stories, which is still part of the same unified whole. Our friend Latif is our biggest video on YouTube right now. Same thing. He takes candid photographs and then digitizes the hell out of them and tells a very unique story on what's actually transpiring versus what do we see of that reality. Terry Crews said his life changed whenever he decided that every job he was going to do, like he was getting paid $1 million to do it. And then the ultimate thought from me here is, as far as marketing and creating, one thing that Tim and I are also going through is finding what we want to create that's true to us and our ethos and our passion. And what do people want to see? Because if we're just creating shit for us, we're going to get 2 views. But if we're creating shit that 10 million people want to see that's still true to us, people are going to fall in love with us for the stories we're telling that captivate them.
I really hope I log into YouTube in like a year or not even that long. And I really hope that, one of my favorite retrospective YouTubers like Wendigoon or Papa Mead or somebody like has a video called Tales from the Exit Door, an analysis or something like that, right? Dude, like it's so crazy to think about that, but like there are people who publish these crazy videos onto YouTube and they have like no views for so long, and then some random big YouTuber just finds it and is like, holy shit, how does nobody know about this? And then does a video, and all of a sudden now boom. And whether you get those views because people found it by searching you on YouTube, whether you get those views because people listen to us talk about it today, or because, whatever reason it can be, I just hope you get those views because I really want people to experience this same thing. And it was so incredible. And getting down and getting the opportunity to sit down and talk with you, Riley, about what you put into this project and about what you're going to be doing moving forward and everything. Like, I don't know. Aaron kind of dropped the mic on that last one. I don't have a mic drop statement. I just simply want to say thank you for joining us, man.
Of course. No, thank you guys so much for having me. This is like my first time to really like get to talk about it, for people to see. It's archived. I mean, I've had these conversations individually with people about this stuff, but I haven't had a chance to like put it out there for anybody. So just giving me a platform, I mean, I can't even thank you enough. Yeah.
So I want to thank the people holding up that platform, the listeners. Thank you for coming along. Thank you for hearing Riley's story. I think now that we've given a little more context and have talked about the meaning behind your project, I think that people are going to be able to see it with a fresh set of eyes instead of just analog horror creepypasta, something they're not into. They can feel themselves traveling through these steps of grief and not only hear the scary stories to tell in the dark cautionary tale, but also feel it in their soul as something they've also experienced. So, thank you to everyone listening and everyone going over to check out WTF Riley on YouTube.
Hell yeah. If you want to support our friend Riley here, please go check him out on YouTube and Instagram. Your Instagram handle and YouTube links we will have in the description below. If you want to support No Streetlights, Aaron and myself, You can always subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, wherever you may be. Instagram, we have social medias. Check us out there too. This way you can keep up to date with what's going on. We like to go ahead and put out teasers for who our guest is going to be throughout the week. So sometimes we like to make a little fun little game like, hey, can you guys guess who we're talking to today or this week? So go join in with us on there. And we just posted a channel update today as of the recording of this episode, which by the time you guys hear this episode, it's been out for a while. But go check that out so you can get a feel for where Aaron and I are hoping to take No Streetlights and moving forward. So thank you all very much.
If you want to collaborate with us, please reach out. If you have a friend whose story needs shared, send them to us. And again, this is only going to expand by word of mouth. Please talk to somebody about our show, or come talk to us about how it's impacted you, because that's going to inspire us to create more content for you.
So a little quick disclaimer here. Our podcast is for entertainment purposes and cannot be substituted for professional medical advice.
If you need help now, please call 911, or you can call or text 988 for immediate intervention. If you need protracted assistance, please hit up betterhelp.com/NSLP for 10% off your first month. That also helps us and you quite a bit.
Yeah, and we also got a Patreon too. But be good to yourselves and each other.
We love you.
Peace.